Today we are proud to announce that the first JetZero factory will be built right here in Greensboro, in the heart of North Carolina's aerospace corridor.
What if the next jetliner you board doesn't really have a fuselage at all? Just one sweeping manta-ray wing that carries everything inside it. Starting in March 2024, JetZero's 12% scale Pathfinder demonstrator began taxi and flight tests across the baked concrete of Edwards Air Force Base, clearing the way for a full-scale blended wing rollout targeted for 2027. No tube, no tail cone, just a single billowing surface that looked more B-2 bomber than Boeing 737. The company behind it, JetZero, says this radical shape can slash fuel burn by up to 50%. That would gut one of the airline industry's biggest expenses and punch a hole in aviation's carbon ledger. But how did this audacious idea get breathing room in an industry dominated by two mega manufacturers? And why are Boeing and Airbus suddenly scrambling to react? Believe it or not, the blended wing dream predates the jet age. In the late 1940s, Northrop's YB-49 flying wing captivated engineers with its efficiency, yet the US Air Force shelved it in favor of more conventional bombers. Later, from 2007 to 2012, NASA and Boeing flew the X-48 testbed, an unmanned 8-foot model that proved a wing-body hybrid could bank, climb, and land like a normal airliner. Still, the concept collected dust because fuel was cheap, certification rules were fuzzy, and airlines weren't begging for radical change. Fast forward to the 2020s, volatile oil prices, net zero pledges, and a public hungry for greener travel turned that dusty concept into a potential lifeline. Enter JetZero, a Los Angeles startup founded by former Boeing aerodynamicist Mark Page and investor-turned-CEO Tom O'Leary. Page spent 2 decades perfecting blended shapes inside classified defense projects. O'Leary saw a commercial gap that neither Airbus nor Boeing seemed ready to fill. Their first pitch deck was ruthlessly concise. Half the fuel, same payload. Early seed money trickled in from climate tech funds, then snowballed when the US Air Force awarded JetZero a $235 million contract in 2023 to build a full-scale demonstrator by 2027. That infusion unlocked government wind tunnels, flight test ranges, and a credibility stamp money can't buy. If you're Boeing or Airbus, the numbers are alarming. JetZero's baseline Z5 promises a 40% fuel cut on routes up to 5,000 nautical miles while carrying roughly 250 passengers in a cabin wider than a 767's. Add in generous cargo holds nested inside the wing's center section, and you get twin-aisle economics for what JetZero insists will be a single-aisle price tag. That value proposition strikes at the heart of every incumbent's narrow-body cash cow. And this is only the appetizer. We haven't even cracked open how a blended wing actually generates lift, balances weight, and lands without wobbling like a frisbee. That aerodynamic mystery is exactly where we're heading next. Let's crack the hood on this manta-shaped machine. In a classic airliner, the wings lift and the tube hauls. A blended wing body flips that logic. The entire surface, nose to tail, is one giant lifting airfoil. Picture a surfboard the length of a football field, thickest at mid-span, tapering toward the tips. Because the fuselage itself makes lift, engineers can downsize the wings, slash surface area, and cut drag by roughly 30 to 40%. Less drag means less thrust, smaller engines, and a massive dent in the fuel bill. But lift isn't the only trick. The Z5 center section is so broad it hides 2 mid-mounted turbofans almost entirely inside the airframe. From the cabin, you'll sit a good 40 feet ahead of the engines, farther than row 10 on a 737, so the cabin should be noticeably quieter on climb out. That buried placement also shields the fan's signature turbine buzz from folks living under the flight path. And then there's weight balance. Conventional jets keep heavy fuel and baggage in wing roots or belly tanks. A blended wing tucks 80% of its fuel load beneath the floor in a shallow vaulted cavity that runs the span of the center section. Keep that mass close to the aerodynamic center, and the airplane doesn't fight itself in pitch. Result: smaller control surfaces, gentler trim changes, more cruise efficiency. Now let's walk inside. Forget a single aisle, or even two. JetZero's cabin concept divides the interior into 3 wide bays with up to 4 aisles fanning from a central spine. Seats can sit 1-3-1 across for premium beds up front, or 2 economy quads farther aft. That openness leaves headroom for skylight windows above and cargo holds below. And because the structure is one continuous shell, designers can carve out lounges or crew rest pods between the ribs instead of shoving them into the tail. Stats time. JetZero touts up to a 50% fuel burn cut versus today's single-aisle workhorses and a 5,000 nautical miles sweet spot range. Los Angeles to Honolulu for half the fuel, or New York to Madrid without the tanker thirst of a wide body. In raw seat mile cost, their math shows the Z5 beating both the A321XLR and 737MA X10, while carrying 250 souls in twin-aisle comfort. If the numbers hold up in service, that's a body blow to every legacy narrow-body program on the books. Of course, claims are cheap, flight hours are priceless. That's why JetZero and NASA cut loose a 1/8 scale Pathfinder test article over the Mojave in March 2024. The remote piloted model checked stability, stall behavior, and landing flare under real-world gusts, the kind of data computer models can't fake. Next up is a full-chord static load rig due in 2025, built with scaled composites to bend and twist the airframe until the wingtips practically kiss. Only when the metal screams and survives will the Air Force green-light first flight in 2027. So, on paper, the Z5 glides farther, sips half the gas, and hushes the cabin. Sounds like a no-brainer, right? Not so fast. Airlines don't live on lift alone. They worship cost per seat, carbon math, and delivery slots they can bank on. That economic verdict comes next, and it could make or break the wing that ate the fuselage. Airlines once cared about fuel simply because it bruised the balance sheet. Now it also bruises the planet. And the clock is ticking. In 2021, the world's carriers agreed to reach net zero carbon by 2050. A moonshot that will cost trillions and hinges on hardware they don't yet have. Enter JetZero waving a spreadsheet that says, cut fuel burn up to 50% on day 1, no exotic engines required. Delta and United quickly grab seats at the table, touting a design that runs happily on today's sustainable aviation fuel and tomorrow's clean hydrogen. Here's why that matters. A typical long-haul twin, say an Airbus A330-900, burns about 2.3 liters of Jet A per 100 passenger kilometers. Swap in JetZero Z5 and, on paper, that drops to roughly 1.2 liters. Fewer liters mean fewer dollars, so cost per seat plunges by an estimated 20 to 25%. Before you even add the carbon taxes, some regions are already rolling out. Airlines that once treated ecometrics as PR frosting now see them as hard currency. Big dreams need big wallets. JetZero's shrewdest move wasn't an investor roadshow. It was winning the US Air Force's $235 million blended wing demonstrator contract in 2023. The Pentagon wants a freighter and tanker that hauls more fuel farther on the same gallon, and it's willing to foot much of the R&D bill. For a startup, that's a dual-use jackpot. Government funding de-risks the prototype, while the credibility badge draws commercial orders. Think NASA underwriting SpaceX's Falcon 9, a military need quietly bankroll in a civil revolution. Meanwhile, the duopoly looks flat-footed. Airbus flirted with the concept through its small Maverick drone, then parked it behind a hydrogen roadmap. Boeing's answer, the new mid-market airplane, remains in what analysts politely call PowerPoint mode, a study shelved and revived so many times it's become folklore. Every extra year of dithering hands JetZero a first-mover window that could stretch 5, maybe 7 years, a lifetime in aviation. Still, no airline signs a billion-dollar purchase agreement on PowerPoints alone. They'll wait for the full-scale demonstrator's first flight in 2027, the moment fuel claims meet real kerosene. If the numbers track, 40% less burn, 5,000 nautical mile reach, the order book could snowball fast because carriers must start retiring today's jets by the early 2030 to stay on that 2050 climate glide path. If the Z5 stumbles, Boeing and Airbus get a second chance to push incremental upgrades and keep the status quo alive. So the next 2 years are make or break. Wind tunnel printouts morph into metal, Pentagon milestones unlock more cash, and airline CFOs sharpen pencils on carbon math. Up next, we'll see whether airports, jet bridges, and evacuation rules can handle a wing that's also a cabin, because efficiency is worthless if passengers can't board it or escape in 90 seconds. JetZero's sleek Z5 may own the sky, but it still has to squeeze into a very earthbound world of gates, jet bridges, and baggage tugs. The airplane's 200-foot span is shorter than a 787's, yet its wingtips sit wider than a 767's parking envelope, just enough to trigger red flags at crowded hubs. The fix is a pair of folding tips that hinge upward after landing, clipping 10 feet off each side so the bird can taxi straight into a standard code D gate. The mechanism borrows from the 777X playbook, but the stakes are higher. If the folds ever jam, the jet might have to wait on a remote pad while 250 passengers stew. Jet bridges pose their own puzzle. The Z5's doors sit higher and farther forward than on tube and wing jets, so JetZero designed a stair-step sill that accepts both today's two-piece bridges and tomorrow's powered ramps. Ground crews will notice the difference first. Instead of driving a belt loader under a tail cone, they'll nose it up beneath the wing's belly, half warehouse and half airfoil. Turnaround times will stay tight only if luggage pits, catering hatches, and fuel imports sit exactly where a ramp rat's muscle memory expects. JetZero claims its mock-up fits existing loaders with a few feet to spare. Airline ops teams will be the ultimate judges. Inside, the cabin raises a different question. Will passengers trade a window view for a cheaper ticket? Out near the edges, seats can sport oval windows the size of pizza pans, but the central bays ride deep inside the wing and lose direct sight lines. The design compensates with LED-backed skylights that mimic daylight cycles and a ceiling-high video wall streaming wingtip cameras. Seats fan out in a gentle V, so even economy passengers get a shoulder's width that beats today's single-aisle squeeze. JetZero tested motion sickness worries in simulators and found the lift feels smoother than on a narrow body, thanks to the giant wing cushioning bumps. Still, market tests will decide whether center section becomes the new middle seat. None of it matters if regulators don't sign off. The Federal Aviation Administration has already ruled that a blended wing can qualify, but only if JetZero proves every novel feature meets an equivalent level of safety. The loudest hurdle is evacuation. 250 people must exit onto slides in 90 seconds, even if half the doors are blocked. Engineers reshaped interior aisles into 4 broad lanes and added illuminated floor arrows that shift color if one exit jams. A full-scale mock-up test is booked for late 2026, past that sprint, and the paperwork avalanche, fire containment, lightning strike, bird ingestion should fall like dominoes. So what happens if the Z5 nails the gate fit, soothes the stomach, and clears the rulebook? Airlines gain a tool that can jump from second-tier US cities straight to Europe, or haul fresh fruit non-stop from Quito to Chicago at half today's cost. Routes once too thin for a wide body suddenly sparkle. That could scatter long-haul traffic across dozens of airports, rewriting where you make connections, or skip them entirely. Now imagine scrolling for flights 5 years from now and spotting blended wing beside the fare. Would you click buy, or wait for someone else to try the Manta first? Drop your answer below and tell us which city pair you'd put on JetZero's inaugural map. Your idea might fuel our next deep dive. What's your most memorable aviation experience? Let us know in the comments.